Subway stands as one of the most widespread restaurant chains the planet has witnessed. Statistically speaking, the majority of viewers are likely mere minutes from one of their outlets at this very moment. Consider this. If you suddenly wanted their signature Italian BMT or their buffalo chicken sandwich, which happens to be my go-to choice, I'd wager most of you could be inside a Subway location, watching them prepare your custom order, before this video concludes. I mention this because since 2002, Subway has maintained more American locations than any competing fast food chain, keeping a substantial margin over enormous brands like Starbucks and McDonald's. Perhaps even more remarkable is that their current 20,000 locations represent a significant decrease from their peak, as Subway has been experiencing difficulties. In 2016, they shuttered more outlets than they launched for the first time ever, and subsequently, their location count has declined by nearly 1,000 annually on average. This clearly signals trouble. They've been hemorrhaging customers, dealing with image problems, and consequently implementing substantial changes attempting to correct their trajectory. Much has transpired with Subway, so this video will examine their massive expansion, identify where problems emerged, and explore their remediation attempts. Let me start by stating that Subway's remarkable growth stems primarily from its fundamental simplicity. I'm referring to the restaurant concept itself, which involves remarkably little complexity. Unlike typical fast food establishments, you won't encounter broilers, fryers, or grease traps. Fewer appliances translate to reduced expenses and diminished space requirements, a tremendous competitive edge. Hey, quick favor before we dive deeper. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the company's documentary, smash that like button and subscribe. Now back to our video. This advantage dates back to their inception in 1965, when a 17-year-old opened the first location to fund his university education. Fred DeLuca aspired to medical school, an expensive endeavor, and his summer employment at a neighborhood hardware shop wasn't generating sufficient income. He had a family acquaintance named Peter Buck, a nuclear engineer. Together, they conceived opening a straightforward sandwich establishment to generate funds. Peter Buck's $1,000 investment launched the venture, and they collaborated to establish Pete's Super Submarines in Bridgeport, Connecticut. They registered their corporation as Doctors Associates, referencing DeLuca's medical aspirations and Buck's physics doctorate. Quite a fitting designation. However, when radio advertisements began airing, patrons became confused, mistaking Pete's Submarines for Pizza Marines. This prompted the name change to Subway to eliminate ambiguity. DeLuca did generate enough money for college, incidentally, where he ultimately obtained a psychology degree instead. But obviously the enterprise far exceeded that initial goal. After 9 years, they'd grown to 16 outlets, still below their target of 32 within the first decade. To accelerate expansion, they initiated a franchise program, essentially allowing others to establish their own Subway locations while compensating the corporation for those rights. Again, the business's simplicity proved advantageous. Historically, launching a Subway franchise has required comparatively modest investment, smaller spaces, less equipment, attracting numerous aspiring entrepreneurs. Since locations fundamentally require only water and electrical power, they've managed to occupy numerous unconventional spaces like cinemas, gas stations, or medical facilities. That's the brief explanation of how they became history's most franchised restaurant. However, they've also achieved success by emphasizing freshness, value, and healthfulness. 3 elements probably wise for virtually any restaurant to highlight, but Subway has executed this exceptionally well. Regarding freshness, they feature those freshly sliced vegetables displayed directly before you for sandwich selection. Additionally, in 1983, they began baking bread on premises, quite unusual in fast food, particularly then. As a bonus, the bread's aroma has attracted many customers. The word fresh itself, they adore that term. It appears in their famous tagline, "Eat fresh." And if you visit a Subway, examine the menus, wrappers, napkins, and everything else to count how frequently that word appears printed. For value, they've consistently attempted competitive pricing, dating to opening day when they sold over 300 sandwiches, averaging 49 to 69 cents each. Their most celebrated example would be the $5 footlong promotion. I recall when they introduced it with that memorable jingle in the commercials. I constantly sing that tune because it lodged in my head permanently, and I apologize if that's now your situation. But that was an enormous campaign with perfect timing, starting early 2008, mere months before the major stock market collapse and associated events. It was an ideal moment for promoting their food's affordability. Finally, regarding health, all those vegetables and the concept promoted by countless athletes over the years, notably Michael Strahan, Michael Phelps, Blake Griffin, and Happy Gilmore. This fresh, delicious, tasty, meaty, turkey-filled cold-cut combo. But easily their most effective health promotion involved Jared Fogle, a college student who shed 245 pounds consuming Subway twice daily. The college newspaper covered his story, Subway learned about it, and he rapidly became their spokesman. This individual became an unlikely phenomenon. People dubbed him the Subway Guy. He appeared in over 300 commercials spanning 15 years, many featuring him displaying his former 60-inch waistline pants. He was central to a South Park episode, and their chief marketing officer attributed potentially half their growth during that period to that campaign. So yes, freshness, value, and healthfulness. That's Subway's desired brand association, and in my view, they've succeeded admirably over the years. However, as I demonstrated earlier, circumstances have deteriorated. So this video is about to become considerably more disheartening as I outline what I consider the 5 primary reasons behind their troubles. First, I believe they were establishing excessive locations. It appears 27,000 across the United States may have been somewhat excessive. As we learned from Jurassic Park, capability doesn't necessarily justify action. Subway restaurants exist competing against other Subway restaurants. Countless instances where one outlet cannibalizes another's sales because they're positioned too closely. Interestingly, even the original Subway, that first establishment named for Pete, wasn't particularly successful. Fred DeLuca has stated he opened the second location to project success. Expansion and new openings familiarize people with the brand, suggesting quality because customers patronize it. I believe he maintained that mentality regarding the brand while continuing expansion to absurd levels in subsequent decades. When someone claims Subway is America's largest fast food restaurant, that could be somewhat misleading. They do maintain more locations, but that doesn't mean greater customer traffic. Measuring by system-wide sales, which I consider the more appropriate metric, McDonald's, Starbucks, and 5 others actually exceed Subway. This is because Subway's per-location sales are abnormally low. For example, Chick-fil-A maintains only 1/17 as many locations, but generates double the sales. Now, Chick-fil-A leads the industry, and perhaps isn't the fairest comparison, but even relative to similar sandwich chains, Subway is noticeably lower. All this suggests Subway prioritized numerous locations over quality, efficient, profitable outlets. My next reason for their decline is Fred DeLuca's passing. This might seem contradictory to my previous point somewhat, but let me clarify. Although his Subway management approach may not have been the safest or smartest in certain aspects, he remains the principal figure behind Subway, easily among history's greatest success stories. As a teenager, he transformed $1,000 into billions over 50 years. He was known for heavy company involvement, sometimes even visiting restaurants disguised to sample food and monitor store-level operations. In 2013, he received a leukemia diagnosis, and by 2015, daily operations control transferred to his sister shortly before his death. It was an extremely distracting period at Subway, to say the least, where management wasn't exactly performing optimally. Following that situation, the person who understood and arguably cared about the company most was no longer present to guide it. Worth noting, the correlation exists. Subway sales began declining in 2015, right after his death. Next on the list, disastrous campaigns. Unfortunately, both their biggest advertising campaigns, Jared Fogle and the $5 footlong, became complete catastrophes. Regarding Jared, it's distressing to discuss this extensively, but I'm assuming you already know he's far from the inspirational figure many once perceived. I'll simply state that in 2015, notice that year again, he received a 15-year prison sentence for crimes involving minors. The $5 footlong wasn't quite as severe, I certainly hope not, but that also soured. After approximately 4 or 5 years, They had to begin phasing it out because maintaining that price point became impractical. Then, after things started declining in 2018, I think desperation set in because they attempted forcing it back differently as the $4.99 footlong. It didn't last long because they still couldn't sustain it, and franchisees grew upset with corporate, damaging those relationships. They were left without any proven campaigns to rely upon. Another decline factor, a series of various controversies. I want to clarify that from my perspective anyway, there's minimal validity to any of these, but for whatever reason, every few years these wild accusations emerge regarding Subway's food. For example, in 2013, a teenager's photograph in Australia sparked discussions about Subway's footlongs measuring only 11 inches. In 2017, the new controversy was their chicken containing only 50% chicken. In 2021, the latest claim was their tuna not actually being tuna. Again, these are seemingly erroneous or exaggerated stories that I'd say have unfairly damaged Subway's reputation. People hear such stories and start patronizing Jimmy John's or alternatives, so you can see how this affects them. Finally, I'll simply state the brand became outdated. In 2019, attempting to revitalize it and reverse trends, they hired a new CEO, John Chidsey, who previously led a turnaround plan at Burger King. Upon arriving at Subway, he was the one who used stale to describe their menu. It had remained largely unchanged for years, partially due to Fred DeLuca's illness and surrounding chaos. So in July 2021, they launched their cleverly named Eat Fresh Refresh, what they call Subway history's largest menu update. It includes new sandwiches, new ingredients, somewhat of a shift towards standardized sandwiches rather than custom building, and has been promoted by some of the most famous athletes like Steph Curry and Tom Brady. They invested $80 million purchasing meat slicers for restaurants, previously pre-sliced before arriving at restaurants. Now, they slice on site. They call that one of the brand's most complex changes ever. They've been making efforts to attract superior talent at the corporate level by offering equity compensation plans and bonuses for the first time. In 2023, they were sold to a private equity firm called Rourke Capital, which also owns Jimmy John's among many other fast food restaurants. It ended their long-time run as a family-owned business, and they say it's yet another part of their transformation journey, as they phrase it. So major changes have been occurring at Subway. If you haven't visited recently, you might be shocked at how different things are, and it seems likely they may continue progressing. There have been some positive indicators, like improving per-location sales. So, I don't know, maybe Subway is on their way to becoming a much more stable and efficient operation. Let me know in the comments what you think about Subway. How do they compare to competing sandwich shops? And what has been your perception of them over the years? Did you stop eating there at some point? Or have you returned? Maybe you never liked them. Maybe you're more of a Schlotzsky's fan. And do you agree with my list of reasons behind their troubles? As always, it's not a complete list, but I do stand behind it as a good summary of their troubles. Let me know if you think anything should be added or removed. And finally, what's your order when you go to Subway? I almost always get that buffalo chicken. So have I been overlooking something? What should I order next time I go there? And any other thoughts you have about Subway, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.